I've been giving y'all some tools. Just like Joshua gave the children of Israel some tools. Just like he said, listen, move out from your position and follow it. Move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. Today, I want to close this series talking about perhaps the most difficult thing about being a Christian. The most difficult thing about being a husband or a wife. The most difficult thing about being a parent. The most difficult thing about being a human being. Today, I want to talk about transition. Bump your neighbor, say transition. Yeah, the title of my sermon today is Crossing Over. I almost called it Skeletons. I was going to talk about we all have skeletons and we've all brought them in and Halloween, whatever, but it just didn't fit. So today, Crossing Over. The hardest thing about getting from here to there, watch this, is actually getting from here to there. It's actually the work that it takes, the transition that is required to get from here to there. People struggle with transition. Is it true? Not being able to transition and transition well is often why people fall away. It's why we give up or we get stuck. Not being able to transition is why addicts go back to using. It's why kids don't stay in college. It's why people get divorced. Life is about transition. It's actually easier, listen, to give your life to Jesus than it is to live your life for Jesus. Come on, somebody. I'm not talking about an event. I'm not talking about a moment. I'm not talking about just giving your life to him. I'm not talking about an event. I'm talking about a change of lifestyle, a changing of your mind, a daily mindset that must be different. Listen, a wedding doesn't make you a wife. Maybe legally, maybe on paper. No, listen, walking away, how you transition from being just mommy and daddy's little girl to transitioning to be someone's partner for life will determine how successful your marriage will be or not. Having sex doesn't make you a father. Might make you a dad. How you transition, how you grow up. Come on, somebody. That's why people will stay living with their mom and dad until they're 30 years old. Because somebody can't let go. Which one? Probably both. Not doing very good transitioning. That's what this series has been about growing up and doing some things different in your life. It's been about changing and recognizing that there are some things, there are some areas in your life that aren't right, and now it's time to address those things, and now it's time to correct those things. If you remember, Jesus said we should have childlike faith. You remember that? But he did not say that we should have childlike behavior. That's been one of the issues that we're running into, is that we've got adults acting like children and adults expecting children to act like adults, and it's a vicious cycle. In this series, we've looked at the baggage that continues to get left into our lives, that mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, coach, teacher said, here, I want you to hold on to this for a while, right? And one of the reasons that you keep struggling with what you're struggling with is because you're carrying things that you were never meant to carry. You've been carrying baggage that someone else was never meant to carry. And they said, just hold this just for a little bit. I just want to see who would be worthy to hold this after church, by the way, to pick it up, to do something with it. We've been clothing ourselves. Been wearing coats that we were never meant to carry. I was going to put the words back on the back, but then I could never wear these coats again. I've already started wearing this like, oh, you got that worry coat on. It's like, dang it. We keep putting on things and that only have power when we put them on, by the way. Only giving attention to the things that we're already giving attention to. We've made decisions, or mom and dad made decisions for us that now we've carried into adulthood. Y'all remember the priorities week? Y'all remember that? Complacency? I'm just kidding. I was just saying who was ready. Always know who's sleeping in church or taking notes, Like, no, I was writing down what you said. Then you bloodied my head. No. So we're giving these things. And then, I think one of the most powerful, the trash that was left behind, that's been stinking up your house for generations, undealt with, unaddressed. unwilling to do something about it. Listen, that's why you deal with what you deal with today. I've said it before, and I'm gonna say it again. It's why you're triggered by what you're triggered by. It's why you're offended by what you're offended by. It's why you prioritize what you prioritize. It's why you handle and how you handle situation and confrontation the way that you handle situations and confrontation because of what's been passed down to you. It's how you function. But here's the problem. As you've heard for 5 weeks, you haven't been functioning properly. They haven't been functioning properly. And so what do? Listen, you and everybody else in your life accommodates to the childlike behavior instead of addressing it and doing something about it. Well, that's what we've been trying to do for the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, doing something about this dysfunction. Because when we accommodate, when we don't address it, when we don't do anything about it, it is dysfunctional, right? And everybody knows what dysfunction is, right? What is dysfunction? To not function properly. That's what dysfunction is. There are some things in your life that aren't functioning properly, and they haven't been for a very, very, very long time. And the reason that it's not functioning properly is because there is sin. We are a flawed people. Our sin started with the original family of origin, our original mom and dad, Adam and Eve. Listen, the root of my problem and the root of your problem goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. It's not genetics, it is synetics. Somebody learned something today. I got some synetics. Yes, you do. Adam and Eve were a perfect people in a perfect world. But then the Bible says in Genesis chapter 3 that they sinned. And when they sinned, they realized that they were naked. And so they were naked. And so they ran because they were afraid and they hid. It was the pilot episode of Naked and Afraid where you got Adam and Eve. Yes, it was. And they realize this, and God says, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. So I'm gonna make a way, and I'm gonna give you a way out. But because of them, because of the synetics, we are a flawed people. Any flawed people in the house? Any sinners in the house? Come on. If you didn't raise your hand, you've just joined the club because you are a liar, right? Every one of us, we are. So since we are a flawed people, there were times growing up that we felt rejected, neglected. We felt unwanted, we felt lied to, we felt exposed, we felt deprived, we felt not important, we felt unloved. And just in case you haven't been here or you need to be reminded, those experiences, whether traumatically or chronically, had significant feelings and emotions attached to them. And those feelings and those emotions began to shape you and program you. And that's why you are the way that you are. The end. You can go home now. Aren't you glad it doesn't end there, by the way? Like if my sermon ended right there or the series ended right there, it'd be very depressing and we should not have anybody come back next week. I'm so grateful that there's another way. I'm so grateful that there's a way out. I'm so grateful that God in his infinite grace and mercy saw us and how we were naked and afraid, but he clothed us and he clothed us now with righteousness if we would just do the right thing and make the right choices and change our minds. So, if that was the end, it'd be bad, but that's not the end. It's just the beginning. We find here in Joshua chapter 3, the children of Israel, after 40 years in the desert, finally getting ready to cross over into the promised land. It was supposed to be, if you don't know, a 7-day journey, but it's taken them 40 years. Say, why? I'm glad you asked. They had a hard time transitioning. They had a hard time transitioning. They are in Egypt as slaves. And God speaks to this man named Moses and tells him to go and deliver them and take them out of Egypt. Now there's many, many more details involved, so just trust me, but Moses's, in essence, his job was to bring them out. And now it's this man Joshua's job to take them in. So you can't just come out of something, you've got to walk into something, right? That's what transition is, by the way. One chapter ends and you can cry and you can be sad about it, but it's because one chapter's beginning, right? We can be sad that our kids are graduating high school, but we need to be happy that they're moving into another chapter in their lives, right? We need to be sad, and cry a little bit when our kids grow up, but we need to be happier that they're actually growing up and they're not 40 years old sleeping in our basement playing Xbox all day, right? The Lord just kept telling me to say that during this sermon. I don't know who needs to kick their kid out of their house right now, but you do. Y'all laughing, I'm serious. So they've been in the desert for 40 years, and now it's time to cross over into the promised land. In chapter 1, the theme of chapter 1 is inspiration. Write it down, say inspiration. Yeah. It's about God speaking to Joshua and inspiring him. And then Joshua going and speaking to the children of Israel and inspiring them. That's one of my jobs sometimes. It's the leaders in your life's job to inspire you, to kind of give you a push, to show you that there's a better way. Listen, Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, if you've been in church for any period of time, you might have heard this. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and be courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Say wherever. In Egypt, in the desert, in the promised land, on the mountaintop, or in the valley, God says, I'm going to be with you wherever you go. It's primarily inspirational. But then in Joshua chapter 2, it's about investigation. Say investigation. Yeah. It says that Joshua sent 2 spies, listen to this, to scout out the land, especially Jericho. You see, Joshua, learned some things from Moses. Many years earlier, Moses sent 12 spies to scout out the land, and 10 of them came back with a negative report. And those 10 negative reports are what got them stranded in the wilderness for 40 years. You got to be really careful who you listen to during times of transition. You got to be really careful who you allow in your life during times of transition. What I'm not preaching is that you just let people in your life that tell you what you want to hear. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if you want to transition well, you need the right people in your life speaking words that will help you get to where you need to get. This is a core value of mine in my life. Listen, if you are negative Nancy, you are not going to be my friend for too long. You're like, well, I don't want to be your friend anyways. Exactly. Well, I just don't think we're going to make it. Ain't no way. Got too many sheeps, too many people. Look at all those people. They're, oh God, there's no way we'll make it to the promised land. Like, man, would you shut up? What about this one? It just looks really scary. There's just no way. Oh God, I don't know if we're going to make it. And listen, here's what we need to do. We probably need to wait another 40 years and scout it out and just make sure. I just don't know. It's like, man, hey, listen, I need you in the back of the line real quick. Get in the very back. This is the worst right here. This is the worst. There's no way we're going to get there. There's no way. This is even a stupid journey. You know why we started in the first place. Should have stayed in Egypt. At least we were getting fed. It's like, be gone from my life. Not talking about wisdom, not talking about different perspective, and I'm definitely not talking about processing. I'm talking about people who have made up their mind, this is not a good idea, we can't go, we shouldn't go, we're afraid to go. Do not surround yourself with those people. Listen, in times of transitioning, you have to have the right people in your life. You've got to shrink your inner circle. You've got to eliminate some people in your life and listen to the right voices if you want to transition well. Well, it just is what it is. It's the way it's always been. It stinks, I know. We just got to carry it around. What kind of advice is that? That's not wisdom. That's stupid. Remember that? Oh, remember this? Y'all remember this one? I'm not even going to put it back on because I'm not going to be able to put it out. Y'all remember this? Furry guy? Yeah, that I came out and y'all thought I was for real? Well, it's the only coat you got. Then I'll go naked. Like, what are you doing, right? You got to shrink your inner circle and listen to the right people in times of transition. Goodness. Keep going out to eat and have drinks with the same girls that's telling you to leave your husband. You need to leave them. Hanging out with the same dudes that's talking about how trashy your wife is and how she's always going to be. You need some new friends in your life. No, it doesn't have to be that way anymore. Quit with all these negative reports. You're going to be stranded in the wilderness for years if you listen to the wrong people. So we got some inspiration, and then we've got some investigation. But then in chapter 3, we find something else. You see, you can't just be inspired, and you can't just have a plan. See, I think that's one time that, God, listen, chapters 1 and 2 are about God's reminder that he has tomorrow. Hey, I've got you. I'm here for you. I have a plan. I'm going to sustain you. Do not be afraid. Be strong and be courageous. Some leaders in your life are inspiring you, and they're giving you a plan and showing you a better way. But there comes a time where you actually have to do something with what's been given to you. There comes a time that you have to start making the decisions. So chapter 3 and chapter 4 teach us that what we do today often determines what God does tomorrow. I said what we do today often determines what God does tomorrow. Can't be praying for a miracle and God to dig a well while you're leaning on a shovel. He's saying, I'm giving you the ability. I've given you the people. I've given you the wisdom. I've surrounded you with people that are going to help you get to where you need to get. Now get to work. Chapters 3 and chapters 4 is about initiation. Say initiation. There are some things that you and I have to do to move forward. There are some things that have been given to us that we have to leave behind. And that decision is up to us. We cannot choose the things that were given to us. We can't. Cannot choose what happened to us at 4 years old, 9 years old. I've told you over and over again that this programming quote that we have in our mind happens in 2 phases, 0 to 8, then about 8 to 16. And what we see, what we experience, what we feel, what is repetitive or what is traumatic to us gets passed down to us. And so there's a reason that you are the way that you are. But you don't have to stay that way. You don't. There are decisions that you can make today that you say, I don't want to do this any longer. It cannot just be a moment in the middle of the service at 901 Church. It can't even just be a decision that you make in the middle of your quiet time on a Wednesday morning. There's some initiation that has to take place. There's some decisions that need to be made. There's some people that need to be removed from your life. Goodness, how many conversations have I had or that you've had where people are going like, man, I'm just stuck and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I go, who do you surround yourself with? And you start naming them and go, yeah, you got to get rid of them in your life, at least for a season. Well, I can't. Why? They're my best friend. Why? They're my sister. They're my mom. There needs to be a season where you step away so that you can start heading in the right direction. The decision is up to us. The decision is up to you. You've got to do something with what's been given to you. Look what it says. So the Israelites packed up and left camp. The priests carrying the chest, as the Ark of the Covenant, walked in front until they came to the Jordan River. The water in the river had risen over its banks. But as soon as the feet of the priests touched the water, the river stopped flowing and the water started piling up at the town of Adam. No water flowed toward the Dead Sea, and the priest stood in the middle of the dry riverbed near Jericho while everyone else crossed over. That's what transition is, crossing over. Leaving behind what was so you could experience what could be. Listen, the children of Israel had been on the wrong side of the Jordan for 40 years. 40 was supposed to be a 7-day journey, took them 40 years. And listen, they didn't get stuck. They stopped. Sometimes God will put some things in your life or put some barriers or some things in your way so that you have to stop and wait and pray and pause and consider and reflect and meditate, no doubt about it. But sometimes you find yourself where you are, not because God stopped you, it's because you stopped yourself. You said, I can't move forward. I'm not going to move forward. This is handed to me. This is who I am. I can't do anything about that, and you're only hurting yourself. He says, think about these things. Think about how long you've been on the wrong side of the river. How long have you been on the wrong side? How long have you been doing some things that you know aren't right? How long have you been making excuses? This sermon, and because of the sermon or the series that we're starting next week and with Pastor Joey, I had to finish today, but I needed 2 more weeks. I did. So maybe I'll do like a Facebook Live or something. Because what I wanted to talk about so bad was denial. Do you know how many people I've had? It's so sad. And I've been there, by the way, that have said, so what happens if I did everything right, if I raised my kids the right way, and they still don't want anything to do with church, don't want anything to do with, it's like, you think you did everything right? Like, for real? Well, yeah, if we did. Now, good intentions are something, and God will bless your motives always. But there's a book that Henry Cloud wrote talking about like the danger of good intentions. It can't always just be good intentions. Actions speak louder than words. What you do repetitively. And so I know there's this realm of denial. Of, well, they're a grown person now. Yeah, sure, they're grown, and I've said it 3 or 4 times. You can't be blaming your mama at 40 years old that your diaper's too tight. But mom, what did you do to contribute to this behavior? Do you need to say you're sorry for some things? Do you need to release some denial and say, we did not handle this the best way? Grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, whoever it is, educator, coach, what did we do? You cannot look at your children or your children's children and see that they're living in such a way or doing something repetitively, consistently, and just think that you had nothing to do with that. But it's also true on the other end. You need to pat yourself on the back and give glory to God when you're watching your kids as adults making decisions like adults should be making decisions. When you're watching them remain pure and lead lives and manage money correctly and take their kids to church, you had something to do with that. What we do today matters. God has tomorrow, but what we do today affects tomorrow. The decisions that we make. And I know transition is so hard. I know that transitions are scary, but it's time that you leave some things behind, even if it hurts somebody else. I'm talking about their feelings, even if they're not okay with it. Listen, you leaving some things behind that some other people are offended by has nothing to do with their feelings. You've got to walk, you've got to grow, you've got to continue to do what God's called you to do, and you are not living your life to please them. Who's them? Whoever it is, boyfriend, girlfriend, mom, dad, aunt, or uncle, God has said, do things, make decisions, make choices that are pleasing to me, even if it costs you everything else and everyone else. And he says, start to live this out. You have to close chapters to begin another chapter. You have to stop living in one reality to move on to the next. Listen, the children of Israel knew what was on the other side. Why didn't they cross? Because this is all they ever knew. This is what they lived in. This was their normal. Did you know? Goodness, I don't have time for this. I wish I did. For real, I might do something this week. We create and we orbit around this dysfunction for so long that it becomes our normal. So anything else we do, even healthy, even godly, even that's pulling us in the right direction, feels so wrong. Why? Because we've lived in this dysfunction for so long. Start talking about your feelings. Talk about my feelings. Start saying what scares you. Nothing scares me. Stop lying. You've been raised to not talk about what scares you. So you keep living in fear and keep living in the dysfunction because you won't even take the first step and say, I'm scared to death. I don't know how to raise my kids. I don't know how to fix my marriage. That's the first step. I need some help. Well, that sounds weak to me. In his weakness, you're made strong. We got to get out of this. You see, Moses, he brought the children of Israel out of slavery, but then they became content with the desert. Listen what Proverbs 27:7 says. Never read it in this translation before. Listen to what this says. When your soul is full, you turn down even the sweetest honey. But when your soul is starving, every bitter thing becomes sweet. What does that mean? It means a lot of things. But it means when you compare, when you compare surviving in the desert with dying in Egypt, the desert starts sounding pretty good. The desert no longer sounds too bad when you compare it with dying in Egypt. And surviving is better than dying in slavery, right? That's not a trick question, right? Like surviving in the desert is better than dying in slavery. I would rather survive in the desert than to die as a slave to my enemy. The only problem is that we are called to thrive in the promised land. We weren't called just to be taken out of Egypt. We were called to be moved into the promised land, not merely surviving in the desert. Listen, one of the greatest things about the desert is that you can thank God that you are no longer where you used to be. But one of the most dangerous things about the desert is that you become content that you are no longer where you used to be. Well, I'm not a slave anymore. I'm not in Egypt dying anymore. Well, at least I'm not a drunk. That's your goal. Well, my dad wasn't even around. At least I'm not getting drunk. That's your goal? At least my kids aren't failing every class and smoking dope. That's your standard? Not to fail class and not to smoke dope? That's called survival mentality. Well, my mom and dad divorced. My mom's been married 3 times. At least we're still married. Your goal is to just still be married? That's survivor mentality. Since when, goodness gracious, since when did surviving become the end game? I'm going to tell you when it did. When mom and dad were slaves, surviving feels like success. You weren't meant to just merely survive. You were meant to be more than a conqueror. You were meant to change trajectories. You weren't meant to just do things better. Listen, Jesus did not come to rock your boat. Jesus came to flip your boat over and to show you a different way. Jesus came to show you that there is salvation and that there's freedom and that you can be more than a conqueror. I believe with all of my heart, God is about to set some people free in the next few moments because you've just been surviving in the desert and it's felt okay and it's felt better because it is better than dying at the hands of your enemy, but he's called you to live in his promises. What does that take? What does that look like? It takes you doing some things differently. It takes you dying to yourself. Listen, I think you can live a better life than the generations before you on your own. I do. But you can't live in the promised land on your own. You can't change the trajectory of your kid's life on your own. You can't make the priorities different on your own. You can't. God did not take you out of Egypt to survive in the desert. He brought you out of Egypt so that we could thrive in his promises. The promised land, this is the way it's supposed to be. I know Adam blew it. I know Eve blew it. But there's another Adam coming. There's another Adam that showed us a better way. Not just so you could be at home more than your dad was. No, so that you could lead your family as a godly example. Not just so you wouldn't be obsessed with your hobbies or your sports or going every weekend. No. That you would make church a priority and going together as a non-negotiable. Not just so that your marriage would make it. No, that you would fall more in love with Jesus every single day so that you couldn't help but to fall more in love with each other every single day. It's time to transition. It's time to cross over. Not from Egypt to the desert, from the desert to the promised land. It's time to not just walk out of something, but to walk into something. And listen, yes, there are seasons where survival is success. I wanted to say that. But not 40 years, not 5 years. Sometimes when you got, hey, we've been there. Sometimes when you got a 3.5-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a newborn, just getting 2 hours of sleep and making it through the day is survival and success, amen? But that's a season. It's not 5 years, it might be a year. Your marriage is struggling, your marriage is falling apart. Listen, sometimes just surviving through the day is success, but that's not where you're supposed to live. That's not where you're supposed to build your house. That's not where you're supposed to become comfortable or complacent. I'm here for a season so that I can continue to move to the promised land. It's time to cross over. So what are you waiting for? What am I waiting for? Watch this. This is so good. After Israel had crossed the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, tell one man from each of the 12 tribes to pick up a large rock from where the priests are standing. Then have the men set up those rocks as a monument at the place where you camp tonight. Joshua chose 12 men and he called them together and told them, go to the middle of the riverbed where the sacred chest is and pick up a large rock. Carry it on your shoulder to our camp. There are 12 of you, so there will be one rock for each tribe. Why do this, Joshua? You're already across. You're literally already reached the promised land. You've already reached the other side. Why make this monument? Why carry these rocks from the riverbed and make that? Why do it? Listen, here's why. Someday, your children will ask, why are these rocks here? Then you can tell them how the water stopped flowing when the chest was being carried across the river. These rocks will always remind our people and our children of what happened here today. The men followed the instructions that the Lord had given Joshua. They picked up the 12 rocks, one for each tribe, and carried them to the camp where they put them down. If I could take this 6 weeks and put it into one sentence, one statement, one thing that you would remember hopefully for the rest of your life is this: you cannot choose what was given to you, but you can choose what you carry across. You get to choose. You get to say, where is it? I'm not carrying this anymore. I wrote the sad face on the back at the first week. Y'all remember that? I used to carry this, but I don't have to anymore. I get to change the narrative. I'm a child of God. I'm forgiven, I'm free, I'm set apart. I no longer have to live up to these expectations because Jesus did what I couldn't do so that now I can live in the freedom that I could not live on my own. So I'm setting this pillar up so that my kids can build their house on this. We've been carrying around this offense and this anxiety, this worry for too long. Worry? Listen, stop giving this to your kids. Stop, my goodness, Lord, okay, in the middle of COVID-19, we continue to give our children this, and we wonder why they're scared to death of everything now. We're children of God. We walk with firm foundation, with boldness, changing the world, not to be afraid of everything that the world has to offer. And when we set this down and say, build your house on this, I would never build my house. Really? Because you watch the news 24/7 and couldn't sleep at night, and now your kids know exactly what coronavirus is, where it came from, what happened. You gave them this. Stop! You can build your house here, or you can change it. I think Pastor Joey said last week, listen, you cannot worry while you worship. You can't do it. But you can't worship while you worry. Change what you give. Change what you bring over. Yes, the world is crazy. No one's denying any kind of reality or saying that something didn't happen. We could argue about that. What did happen, what's not happening. But that's not here today. But we can change what we do with it. You cannot always choose which river you cross, but you always get to choose what you bring across with you. It's the hardest thing I've ever dealt with in my life. I'm here for you, but you get to choose what you bring across it. You've got to cross it. You could write divorce. You could write, I give up. You could write, when the going gets tough, I throw in the towel and I walk away. You could write, man, I just don't transition very well. I don't deal with offense very well. Or you could write perseverance, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. I'll tell you, if you work on those things, your marriage will get better. That's what you can bring across. You get to choose. This stinks. This is so heavy. I'm only able to carry it because I'm super strong. No, I got Jesus. It's just balloons. That's what it is. I said, don't you put something heavy in there. It's going to ruin the illustration. You're able to say, I'm going to leave this behind. But your mama gave you that. Yeah, it just kind of stinks. You know what Papa's going to think. I know. And I love Papa. But I want to be better than Papa. And I don't want my kids to deal with the same stuff that you dealt with, Dad. And hey, Dad, I know you dealt with it the best you could. And I forgive you because you're flawed just like I'm flawed. I'm just choosing not to bring it across. And I'm not mad at you anymore. I forgive you for what you said, what you did. I'm just choosing not to say it. I'm just choosing not to do it anymore. Listen, if someone can begin the cycle of dysfunction, someone can break the cycle of dysfunction. If someone can start it, someone can stop it. You say, how? What does it look like to cross over? How do I cross over? I'm out of time, but I'm going to say this. We read it week 2, I believe. Change the former way of life that was part of the person you once were, corrupted by deceitful desires. Renew the thinking in your mind by the Spirit and clothe yourself with the new person created according to God's image in true righteousness and holiness. 1 Corinthians 15:22 says, for as in Adam all died, but in Christ all will be made alive again. What Adam messed up, Jesus restored. What Adam and Eve broke that we've continued to carry, Jesus gives us a better way. We can clothe ourselves in righteousness day in and day out, not just for us, but for who we give it to. We're going to set up stones so that our children and our children's children and our children's children one day say, thank you, Jesus, for the blood that you shed. Thank you for grace. Thank you for mercy in our sons and our daughters. Come on, let's sing that together. We'll continue to know.